It began like any other late-night segment: glitzy lights, the familiar band, an excited crowd, and the host stepping onto the stage with his trademark smirk. The night's energy was electric, a mix of anticipation and curiosity buzzing through the air. Everyone knew the guest was a big deal, a cultural icon with opinions that stirred headlines and inspired memes. The stage was set for an interview that could be enlightening, entertaining, maybe even a little awkward. But no one could have predicted how fast things would turn. As the conversation kicked off, it started with a few seemingly light jabs, jokes really. The kind of sarcastic teasing that had long been a staple of the host's style. He poked fun at the guest's social media habits, made a couple of remarks about recent headlines, and followed up with a satirical video clip. The crowd laughed and even the guest smiled faintly. But beneath the surface, something shifted. The laughter started to feel uncomfortable, less like shared amusement and more like tension disguised as comedy. The host didn't back down. Instead, sensing the crowd's reaction, he doubled down, launching into a rapid-fire monologue laced with cutting sarcasm and a few eyebrow-raising comments. Some in the audience chuckled, unsure of whether to enjoy the show or cringe. Others looked around, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. The camera caught it all. The slow shift in body language, the tightening of facial muscles, the silent pause between lines. The guest, visibly annoyed now, tried to redirect the conversation, steering it toward a more serious topic. But the host interrupted with a biting remark, triggering audible gasps from the audience. That was the tipping point, the moment where it all changed. A hush fell over the room as the guest slowly turned, removing the microphone and standing up. The host froze, eyes locked on his guest, unsure whether this was still part of the act or something very real. No smile, no witty comeback, just a dead stare, followed by a quiet step away from the chair. Gasps erupted across the studio. A few clapped, unsure what to do. Others watched in stunned silence as the guest calmly exited the stage. The camera didn't follow. The director cut to the host, who now seemed less composed, blinking at the space where a guest had just been seated. For once, the master of punchlines was speechless. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or not. Was it scripted? Was it real? Every face in the room wore the same expression, a mix of disbelief and amazement. The host chuckled nervously, trying to pull the room back together with a joke, but it didn't land. The room still felt off-kilter, the energy awkward and strained. This wasn't just a TV moment. It was the moment. Backstage, crew members scrambled, unsure what the next step should be, producers whispered behind clipboards. The show had been carefully planned, meticulously timed, and yet now it was spiraling into something unscripted and raw, and the cameras were still rolling. In the minutes that followed, viewers across the country reached for their phones. Clips began surfacing online before the show had even gone off air. Social media lit up with speculation and commentary. Every frame of the exchange was analyzed, every line dissected. People wanted to know what happened, what went wrong, who crossed the line. It was like a cultural earthquake. One awkward conversation had created ripples that spread far beyond the stage. The host, still recovering from the moment, tried to carry on, but his tone had changed. He looked less like the confident comedian, and more like someone who'd just been caught off guard in front of millions. Even the next guest, waiting in the wings, seemed hesitant as they were brought on stage. What began as a routine late-night segment had transformed into an unforgettable moment of live television. A moment that no one could have scripted, no matter how skilled the writers. The exchange would be replayed, memed, and debated for days, if not weeks to come. And in the middle of it all stood one host, blindsided by a moment he never saw coming. The air was already thick with tension by the time the moment came. A strange kind of silence had settled into the studio, the kind that doesn't usually belong in a room filled with cameras, lights, and laughter. People could sense it. The energy had shifted, veered off course from playful banter into something far more serious. It wasn't just about jokes anymore. It was about pride, control, and the unpredictable nature of live conversation when egos are in play. Then, without warning, he stood up. There wasn't a dramatic outburst, no raised voice or thrown microphone. Just a quiet, deliberate movement. His face was unreadable, a calm mask that somehow made everything more unsettling. The audience didn't know whether to clap, laugh, or hold their breath. What came next, however, removed all doubt. He leaned ever so slightly into the mic, as if considering whether to speak at all. Then he did. Just one sentence. Low, steady, and sharp enough to cut through the noise that hadn't even begun yet. No yelling, no threats. Just a line so piercing it felt like the air got colder. The host froze, visibly stunned. For a man so quick with his words, his silence said everything. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but stopped himself. No punchline came, no clever deflection. Just a pause, thick and loaded. The audience had gone completely silent. No gasps, no murmurs, just pure stillness. Whatever was said, it had hit a nerve, not just in the room, but beyond it. It felt personal, real, unrehearsed, a moment of vulnerability cloaked in power. He didn't wait for a response. Turning without a glance back, he walked off stage, leaving behind a silence so profound it was louder than anything that had come before. The only sound was the creaking of the studio floor and the quiet whir of the cameras still running. The host, now visibly rattled, tried to recover, offering a weak smile to the crowd. It didn't land. The energy had drained from the room like air from a balloon. In the control booth, producers scrambled to adjust. Directors barked commands in hushed tones. There was no script for this. The guest chair sat empty, glaring in the spotlight, a ghost of what had just transpired. The band, unsure whether to fill the silence, hesitated. Viewers at home were frozen in front of their screens, watching something they couldn't quite process. One sentence had turned a talk show into a cultural event. Online, it began to explode. Seconds after the moment aired, clips began to circulate. Poorly. Recorded phone videos from audience members, screenshots of the host's expression, tweets frantically trying to decipher what had just happened. The internet doesn't wait for confirmation, it reacts, and this time, it reacted with fury, curiosity, and awe. Theories emerged instantly. What had triggered the moment? Was it a setup? Was it a reaction to something deeper than the night's conversation? People debated the meaning behind the words, the timing, even the tone. Commentators replayed the clip on loop, each time trying to catch some hidden meaning in the way he delivered that line. It wasn't just the words, it was the weight behind them. The delivery, the confidence, the finality. In the days that followed, it became more than just a television moment. It sparked conversations about respect, boundaries, and the role of media figures when confronting people who aren't there for spectacle. Critics weighed in, some defending the host's intentions, others praising the guest for refusing to play along. Memes were made, but so were op-eds. Everyone had a take, and none of them could ignore the moment that had left them all speechless. Back. In the studio, the host eventually tried to carry on with the show. A few jokes here and there, a shift in topics, another guest brought in to patch over the night's raw edge. But the room never quite bounced back. The laughter was thinner. The comfort was gone. Because when someone leaves a stage with words that hang in the air long after they're gone, you don't just forget it. It replays in your mind over and over, asking questions no punchline can answer. The moment he left the stage, it was as if the studio itself had been struck by lightning. For a brief second, the silence was deafening. No laughter, no applause, not even the usual shuffling of chairs or coughs from the back row. Just stunned. Stillness, the kind that only happens when something truly unexpected cracks through the polished surface of live television. And then, all at once, the audience reacted. It began with gasps, audible, sharp intakes of breath. Then came the murmurs, people turning to each other, eyes wide, mouths half open, whispering in disbelief. A few laughed nervously, as if unsure whether what had just happened was real. Some clapped out of instinct, a reflex action to the energy. in the room, though their faces said they weren't sure what they were applauding. Others just sat frozen, trying to process the emotional whiplash of a situation that had gone from entertaining to historic in less than a minute. Phones came in, out almost immediately. Bright screens lit up the darkened rows like a sea of flashlights, fingers tapping frantically. The audience knew they'd just witnessed something significant, raw, unplanned, and unforgettable. They didn't want to wait for the re-air or next morning's headlines. They wanted to be the first to upload, the first to tweet, the first to capture the chaos and share it with the world. In the back row, someone whispered, "Did that just happen?" Another responded, "No way this was scripted." And those words echoed a sentiment felt by everyone in the room. This wasn't comedy. This wasn't a clever stunt designed to drum up views or ratings. This was real, unfiltered, unmistakable. On stage, the host stood still, visibly stunned. For a moment, he stared out into the audience, possibly searching for reassurance, some confirmation that he still had control of the room. But the control was gone. The room had taken on a life of its own. A collective consciousness was now guiding the energy, and it was wild, confused, charged with adrenaline. Someone in the front row clapped slowly, almost sarcastically. It triggered a wave of unsure applause, which quickly dissolved into awkward silence again. The band didn't play. The lights didn't shift. The cameras lingered too long on empty space, unsure where to point. For a show built on rhythm and timing, everything was now just off. Then came the audience's collective realization. They were part of something bigger than a regular taping. Whatever just unfolded was going to make headlines. It was going to become a meme, a flashpoint, a viral moment etched into internet history, and they were there to see it live. Their faces, their reactions, they were now part of the story too. Within minutes, the ripple effect started spreading. Posts went up in real time. Short clips taken from shaky handheld phones began populating every platform. "You won't believe what just happened," read one caption. "This show just broke the internet," said another. Hashtags exploded into trending status. Comment sections flooded with confusion, admiration, criticism, and shock. People who hadn't even seen the show were suddenly invested. Opinions formed based on 15-second clips, each reaction spawning a new wave of conversation. Back in the studio, the crowd remained restless. It wasn't just about what had been said, but how it had been said. Cool, calm, surgical. That kind of moment cuts through the noise and sticks with you. Some audience members were visibly uncomfortable, unsure if they'd just witnessed a breakdown or a breakthrough. Others were giddy with the kind of excitement that only comes from witnessing something unpredictable, something that breaks the mold. As the night wore on and the cameras kept rolling, the vibe never quite returned to normal. Every joke that followed felt forced. Every segment that played afterward seemed dull in comparison. Because the moment had already come and gone, and everything else paled next to it. The audience knew it. The crew knew it. And the energy that buzzed through the seats wasn't the usual kind of laughter and applause. It was the crackling aftershock of a cultural tremor they didn't expect. The days that followed were unlike anything the show had experienced before. What began as a single charged moment during a late-night taping had evolved into something much larger, something that extended far beyond the studio walls. The headlines came fast, splashing across every major outlet with bold letters and carefully chosen phrases, some sensational, others cautiously analytical, but all agreeing on one thing. This wasn't just an awkward exchange or a celebrity walkout. It was a flashpoint. Within hours, social media had already spiraled into full debate mode. Clips of the moment circulated at lightning speed, gathering millions of views. Some were raw, uncut versions taken by audience members. Others were polished recaps put together by commentary channels and news aggregators. Edits popped up with dramatic music overlays, slow-motion replays, even lip readers trying to analyze subtle mutterings caught on camera. The internet wasn't just reacting, it was dissecting, memifying, and mythologizing. What followed next was a digital storm. Supporters on one side flooded platforms with messages defending the action as bold, necessary, and even heroic. They praised the refusal to be mocked, celebrated the decision to walk away rather than engage, and framed the moment as a masterclass in restraint and self-respect. On the other side, critics came down hard. They argued about professionalism, called the walkout petty, and accused the entire scene of being a thin-skinned overreaction to what they viewed as standard late-night fare. Commentators and influencers added fuel to the fire. YouTube reactions, live-stream debates, and think pieces poured in by the hour. Pundits on television spun their own narratives, some sympathizing with the guest, others doubling down on the host's right to challenge. No one could agree on the intent, but everyone agreed on the impact. It had captured the attention of millions, and there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. The show itself responded with a carefully worded statement. It was vague, diplomatic, and clearly designed to settle things down. A mention of creative differences, a nod to respecting all perspectives, and a soft assurance that the incident was being reviewed internally. It only made people more curious. Viewers wanted behind-the-scenes details, conversations between producers, reactions from the crew. Everyone was digging for more. In the days that followed, the host addressed the incident on air. Not directly, not by name, but with enough nuance and implication that viewers instantly knew what he was referring to. His tone was different, less punchy, more measured. He cracked a few jokes, but they lacked the usual edge. It was clear he felt the pressure. The confidence had been chipped, if only slightly, and it showed. Even the studio audience was different. Laughter came a beat slower. Applause felt hesitant. Something fundamental had changed in the dynamic. Meanwhile, other celebrities started weighing in. Some shared similar experiences, hinting at past tensions and off-camera drama. Others voiced support, recounting their own moments of discomfort during interviews. It became a wider conversation about boundaries, performance, and the expectations placed on public figures during media appearances. The talk show, once a predictable space for light-hearted interviews, was now being re-evaluated as a stage for deeper power dynamics. And then there were the conspiracy theories. A portion of the internet insisted it was all staged, a masterfully orchestrated publicity stunt meant to generate buzz, spike ratings, and keep the show relevant. They pointed to the timing, the camera angles, the absence of commercial breaks at key moments. Others swore it was spontaneous and authentic, the product of real emotions clashing in a very public arena. No one could prove either theory, and that uncertainty only made it more compelling. What became undeniable was how deeply the moment had pierced the cultural conversation. It wasn't just about one person walking off a stage, it was about how people respond when provoked, how much authenticity is allowed in polished entertainment, and what happens when someone chooses dignity over performance. The fallout continued, long after the cameras stopped rolling, echoing in tweets, articles, interviews, and endless speculation. Whether applauded or criticized, one thing was clear: the moment had changed the rules. In the aftermath of that unforgettable moment, what lingered wasn't just the shock, it was the questions. Audiences across the country found themselves replaying the footage not just to witness the walk-off again, but to understand what it meant. It wasn't about whether it was justified or overblown, it was about what it revealed. The vulnerability behind the bravado, the clash between entertainment and authenticity, and the very thin line between performance and principle. Late night. Television has always walked that tightrope, blending satire with sincerity, poking fun while pretending it's all in good faith. But this time, the script was thrown out. In its place came something unscripted, something real. Whether it was a moment of defiance, discomfort, or quiet rebellion, it struck a nerve in a way carefully crafted monologues never could. The conversation quickly grew beyond the people directly involved. It tapped into a deeper cultural undercurrent. One, about how public figures are treated, how media frames personalities for amusement, and how far is too far in the name of entertainment. People began asking what should be expected from guests on these platforms, and what responsibility hosts have to maintain a space that balances wit with respect. The moment sparked more than just headlines, it ignited dialogue. It also exposed the power of silence. In a world where everything is commented on, debated, and clipped for virality, the most impactful move turned out to be walking away, not yelling, not retaliating, just choosing not to engage further. And that choice echoed louder than any mic drop ever could. As the noise around the incident slowly began to settle, it became clear that the story was bigger than one show, one night, or even one personality. It was about how we watch, how we judge, and how we value the interactions that unfold in front of us. It showed that even in a medium built on rehearsed humor and clever sound bites, raw human reactions still have the power to take over everything, and remind us that real moments are rare and often uncomfortable. In the end, whether people sided with the host or the guest mattered less than the impact it left. This wasn't just a fleeting viral clip, it was a cultural checkpoint. It challenged assumptions, disrupted routines, and forced both creators and consumers of media to pause and reconsider what we're really tuning in for. And sometimes, that kind of disruption is exactly what a carefully